What's going on, people? Welcome to a brand new edition of the Keep It Certi podcast. Hope everyone had a brand new amazing year. We're here with the most amazing guest, the founder and CEO of the amazing Switch4Schools, Phil Slade. How you doing, sir? You okay?
I'm doing fantastic. We're in Dubai at the moment. Been visiting some incredible schools and incredible educators, and yeah, it's been wonderful to be able to meet with. It's always wonderful to meet with people from wherever I am around the globe, and get a sense of their vision and their passion for the communities that they live in, and just notice and see how we can insert into their community and the amazing things that they're doing in a meaningful way to really supercharge and bring them together and inspire them and to see some of the things, the generational things in communities that people thought were too hard to shifting. And that's amazing. That's incredible.
Honestly, it's so incredible because obviously we met, as of the recording, we met a couple of weeks ago at the amazing Bet event, didn't we?
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. The big conference in London. Yeah, that's right. It was
that's
great.
right.
It was a fantastic little conference.
It really was. I mean, were you there for both days actually, or just that first day?
Sorry, say that question again.
That's okay. I know it was a 2 day conference. Were you there for both days or just the one day?
All 3 days. No, the
All
three
three
days
days.
there. So
Oh,
yeah,
sweet,
it's a 3 day
sweet.
conference, and yeah, we were there for all 3 days, in for a penny and for a pound. We flew all the way from Australia, so when you go that far, you don't just sort of pop in. You're like,
Yeah.
I'm here, we're gonna be there for all it's worth. So yeah, it was great, and was meeting with schools in London and the UK, and went up to even popped up to Northern Ireland and had a real good connection there with the universities to see what they're doing with mental health and well-being, but also a lot of the technology and AI and how we might be able to integrate with some of the things they're doing and from a technological point of view as well, which is really exciting.
That's so exciting. 'Cause the moment I met you, I saw what you were doing. I thought it was just incredible. Honestly, so
Mm.
amazing. I mean, for those that might not know, actually, what is Switch for Schools and how did it come about?
Yeah, look, Switch4Schools is essentially a way that we can practically translate the psychology behind improving mental health and well-being and people's both sense of themselves and the way they interact with others around them, and insert it into a situation like a school situation. So it improves the health and well-being of students and teachers and the community, and supports teachers and supports the mental health professionals within that scene, and also the administration to help give the data to the right people at the right time to help make the right decisions, move students and teachers to better self-regulation so that they're getting to the end of the day with more energy and enthusiasm and navigating life in a much more adaptive way. And start to turn the idea of emotion or unpleasant emotions, the emotions of sadness and anxiety and scared and anger and things like that, into superpowers. So how do we stop as a community looking at unpleasant emotions as the enemy, as the thing that we're trying to suppress or not use, and realize that if we just turned around and used this as a superpower, that it'll change everything. It'll change your relationships. It'll change how successful you are at life. There's been all these experiments, and I love the Dunedin experiment, which was done in Dunedin, which is in New Zealand, and they got 1,035 uh, uh, mothers to be in hospitals in 1968. And they said to these 1,035 mothers, we want to meet your babies when they're 4 years old, so in 1972, and test them over life because we want to see, can we see in a 4 year old what the next superstar athlete, the next prime minister, the next captain of industry, the next criminal mastermind, is there something that we can test there and track over time to see if there's something about personality or some sort of life factor that equals success. And they were looking at success both as financial success, status success, and success in your health, like how healthy are you, how long you're going to live. And the interesting thing about this research in particular, just as a little side note, is that usually in research there's an attrition rate. So there's after 4 or 5 years, people opt out. You're allowed to opt out, and you can imagine that these are 4 year old kids that start this at the behest of their parents that sign them up before they were even born, And you imagine that there'd be, they'd hit teenagers and go, this was just something my parents did. I got my own. I'm opting out. I dump out. And a normal attrition rate, 25%, that's pretty acceptable as an attrition rate. The most amazing thing about this particular piece of research, which drew on all different socioeconomic demographics and all sorts of cultural demographics, and that's why they chose Dunedin, because it was such a hot pot of every single sort of microcosm of society that you could think about. 900, more than 950 of the original participants are still in this study today. And they come
Wow.
back each year and study everything about their health and their sociology and their physiology and their psychology to tease these things apart. So the data that they've got is amazing. These are the guys that prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that smoking and lung cancer are correlated. I don't know if you can remember back in the 80s, but there was scientific debate, about whether smoking was actually bad for you or maybe it's really good for you and the social aspects. And these guys were like, hey, we've got a cohort of people, and the people that are smoking have got lung cancer, and the people that don't. So that's pretty irrefutable evidence, and so the science is super, super solid. And in the 90s, they thought, well, we've got enough data to really figure out what is predictive of success in life. And the things like how smart you were, or how rich you were, or if you were learning music, or you were talented at sports, or you're doing lots of sports, or lots of things, or whether how many languages you learned, or what language you learned, what was your cultural background and that culture's attitude to learning and stuff like that. They thought surely those things have a big impact on success in life. And it turns out none of them had an overriding success. It seemed to be kind of hodgepodge, that sometimes it did and sometimes it didn't. The only thing that was the differentiator between people being successful and not over their lifespan was emotional intelligence. So this ability to be able to delay gratification, to be able to bring on things that they need to do and not trade off their future self, which is procrastination, right? It
Hmm.
takes emotional intelligence not to procrastinate, because you're saying, I want to do something now that doesn't feel as good in order for me to feel good in the future. And so
Hmm.
it's its ability to bring your future self back to you now in a really adaptive way. And so people that can do that don't procrastinate so much. And the most amazing thing about this is that people can learn this. So, sort of backtracked 1 second. If you go back to that research, that means that if there's a poor kid from a disadvantaged neighborhood that doesn't have a high IQ, that's not doing well, not for all intents and purposes shouldn't get ahead in life. If they learn good emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is a skill that's learnt, like playing the piano or learning a language. If they learn emotional intelligence and get strong emotional muscles, they will do better at life than someone who's come from a rich family with all the privilege, who's smart, who's talented at sports, and does all the things that you would think would set people up for success. But if that person doesn't have emotional intelligence, they won't do as good in life. And so it's the only thing. And so this becomes incredible, because it means no matter where you are or where you come from, your life will be better the moment that you start building your emotional muscles. And it doesn't matter at what age you are either. I had a letter, a beautiful letter from an 80-year-old lady a few years ago when I wrote my first book, and she'd read the book, and she said, I realized that I hadn't spoken to my daughters for about 40 years, and it was something that was bugging her. She was obviously later in life, she was a little bit frail, and she said. She read the book and she realized, well, maybe my attitude towards them, irrespective of whether I'm right or wrong, there's that emotional kick that I was feeling, and that was causing me to behave in ways that were kind of ostracizing my family away from me. But I really didn't want that. And I realized, well, what about if I just got rid of that little kick? What about if I just worked on that so that I wasn't so both fixed on being right, but I want that relationship. And so she worked on herself for a few months, and she was writing to me because she said, I've just come home from having a coffee with both my daughters 3 months after she'd read the book. So in a short period of
Wow.
time, 3 months after, and she said, I'm not only happier in myself, I've just met my daughters and just met my grandchildren for the very first
Oh,
time. It's an incredible thing. And this nothing had changed. Nothing had changed in her circumstance. The only thing that had changed was her looking at herself, looking at where she was being offended, and going, "Is that a little spotlight for me to start working on my emotional intelligence?" This was an 85-year-old, and was changing her life. You can imagine how amazing this is going to be if we look at our kids and our teachers and our young parents today, And I think that's no one helps young parents, no one knows how to parent, and there's all sorts of these social rules that kind of put this pressure on parenting and that home environment, which is creating all sorts of maladaptions in the way that kids behave and interact. And social media gets a lot to blame, and probably does play a really big role in some of the kids sort of maladaptions. But at the heart of it, it's just that parents haven't learned how to set boundaries. They haven't learned how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. They haven't learned about how you're allowed to, create something that feels bad right now for something better in the future, and that confidence that comes with parenting, but realizing that the emotional kick that wants you not to do it is a lack of emotional intelligence. There's a piece there was able to say you need to be able to see the emotion in the moment, and then not just moderate for it to create a peaceful scenario, but use it. Sometimes peace isn't the overall goal, and people often undermine their boundary making for the sake of peace in the moment, but it kind of makes for problems for them later in the future. And it's like, you know what? You will be more at peace in the long term if you stick with those boundaries. And this is about not letting it affect you as parents, because often the way that we treat kids is a somehow reflection of us. Anyway, it's more complicated. But the point of that is whether it's marriage issues, whether it's parental issues, whether it's kids throwing chairs around at school, whether it's really serious issues like anorexia, or some of the things that high depression and things like that, or generalized anxiety disorder, all these sorts of things that happen. At the heart of all of those is emotional dysregulation. And by focusing on emotional dysregulation, which is what Switch does. So coming back, long TED talk here, coming back to the original point of the question, Switch for Schools is dealing with the arsonist, dealing with the thing that's lighting all these spot fires, bullying and harassment, and all these sorts of challenges, and then these little micro traumas that are through the system, enabling people to look at those and go, they're the challenges that I'm overcoming, and realizing how much power they have as themselves. And when you look at the system and how schools work, you realize that what you need then is not just data, not just hints and trips, but you need lesson plans, you need videos, you need resources, you need all these sorts of things, you need suggestions, you need nudging engines, you need algorithms that are helping everyone within the system move them towards different things that they're able to say, hey, people like you that either are giving us data like you, or that are in the system like you, do these types of things that help, and maybe they'll help you as well. And really simple things like that. But it's helping everyone in the system. It's saving teachers time. It's taking all the energy vampires that suck all the energy out of a day. It's making teaching much more enjoyable, because it's allowing teachers to refocus on the very reason that they started teaching in the first place, which was the love of students and wanting to change the life of those little cherubs that sometimes don't feel like a cherubs, that's what they're there for, right? And all teachers all over the world that I meet, very rare is the teacher that didn't get into the game or doesn't want to have a positive and a major impact. And it's unfortunate when you see teachers sort of have lost that passion, that desire. And when we start working with, you can sort of see it coming back. It's like you were fanning the embers of these flames that goes, I'm allowed to just teach again. And I've got the space, and I've got a way of being able to interact with these kids. And the kids have got a way of interacting. You look at year 10 boys. Year 10 boys all around the world are problems, right? They don't do what they're told, and it doesn't matter really. Even in the most polite cultures, year 10 boys are a problem, right? And when you start working with these year 10 boys and say, what's going on there is that you're basing your rebellious behavior out of fear. You're scared. You're scared. Scared is something of the immediate, fear of the now, whereas anxiety is kind of fear of the future. Girls tend to have fear of the future. Guys tend to have more fear of the now. They think it comes from the evolution of sort of protecting, families as well, as opposed to protecting the now from the lions or the attackers and things like that. But that's all theories. We don't know really why, but there does tend to be a difference, and these are bell curves and all sorts of things where it's not pejorative for everyone, but for most people, this is true. And the guys tend to be going through that time where they're forming tribe, they're forming connection, they're wanting to be cool, they're scared of rejection, really scared of rejection and ostracism. But then they realize that's every human on the planet has that fear to some degree, and it's a bit more present in them. And how they outwork that is that instead of the anxiety of the exam that's coming up, or being attentive in class and wanting to learn because they want to get a good grade, that anxiety is less than the fear that they have of being ostracized from their general connection. And so they're more likely to act out in a rebellious nature and not listen to the teacher and not want to do that. It's not them. It's not got anything to do with the teacher. It's got everything to do with them trying to find their place in the world, and they've got this scared energy inside of them that they don't know what to do with, and so they become rebellious because they're fearful of losing their mates, or being not close to their mates. When you tell year 10s this and you be explicit about it, it's funny how all of a sudden 70-80% of the hooligans go, oh, I am scared. Like it's like you've spoken to something deep inside of them that's never been exposed before, and they go, oh my God, I can see that. And it changes their behavior. They haven't become different people. It's not like they're just good people, or it's not that they were bad people, right? This is just the power of emotional intelligence. Or you look at a 2-year-old, or a prep kid who comes to school out of COVID. Maybe one or two, a parent, maybe they're the only child, or they've got two kids, and they've never been told no in their life. And they get to school and they get told no, and it's like the world is falling down around them. And it's like, well, no, that's an important lesson for you to learn. But the teachers don't know how to deal with that, and then and being able to start that emotional journey that young, and you can start learning emotional intelligence as a 4-year-old, just like you would if you were learning a language or piano. The amazing thing is you can start to see the transformation in these kids. By the time they hit to year 2 or year 3, they're really starting to learn this language of emotion, which is so important. If you're going to have a language of emotion, if you don't have a language of emotion that's mapped to a framework which looks at intensity and arousal, if we can talk about anger, but that doesn't mean anything. You've got to be able to say, what's the difference in anger? Sure, you're angry, but are you irritated, or are you annoyed, or are you frustrated, or are you furious, or you're fuming, or you're seething? Like these are all levels of anger and levels of being in and out of control. And when you got these words that are mapped to this emotional state inside of you, you can do this young and old and all those sorts of things, you can start this journey of emotional intelligence. It's an incredible ride as you start to unlock people's potential. Because that same Dunedin study, back to the beginning, back to the very beginning, it's one thing to say that's the one thing that unlocks success in people's lives. But you think the flip side is also true, right? So if you're not learning and acting out in an emotionally intelligent way, you are guaranteed not to live to your full potential. So if you're living an emotionally unintelligent life, you are not living to your potential at all. It's guaranteed that no matter how successful you are, you could be much more successful if only you looked at what how this unlocks. And sometimes it's you can be financially successful and have beautiful family relationships and love yourself, like yourself. Oh man, the amount of kids that I've walked through to say, you know what, you are not a mistake. You are not a mistake. You're okay. We've all got challenges. No one's born like without a challenge. I'm dyslexic, for crying out loud, and I've written 3 books and done a master's program. I didn't even know that I was dyslexic until at the end of my master's program. I just thought I was a bit dumb. I didn't realize that other kids didn't have these challenges. Who cares? Like this is not about that. Can I look at myself and go, for my, I'm not the prettiest guy in the world. I'm not the suavest. Other people just got this natural way with people where they get next to them and they're just loved, and I don't sort of have that. But I've got other things. I've got this boundless enthusiasm for what I do that is just annoying at times. This is hardly a conversation. Also, at the moment, you haven't even said anything. That can be really annoying, right? But it's like this is me, and how do I harness that energy? How do I love that about myself? And I'm 47, approaching 50, or as I like to say, halfway. I'm getting to the halfway mark. now. And man, I wish I knew that when I was 16, 17, or even 12, just to go, you're lovable, you're likable. You don't need to do anything more than you are to be likable. People will like you, so like yourself. Give yourself a break, right? Once you like yourself, then go and change the world. There's nothing stopping you, but it's just so much about this. So much of everything that I'm talking about is based around this emotional competency, this skill that is it's understanding, managing, and using emotions. Practice it. Practice the dial up and dial down, the management of your energy through the day, the ability to or not take on other people's pain and load, but still be empathetic towards them. These are all really crucial skills that we've just never really been taught, and partly because science is only just realizing in the modern age how important these things are, and that we can start pulling them apart. And increasingly important in an increasingly digital age, where we're just living different lives now than we did 40 years ago. It's not the same. Kids growing up today, it's not like kids growing up in the 90s, 80s, you
Mm,
know. I think
for
my I
sure.
think my headphones just went from my headphones because they just powered up. Hopefully you can still hear me
That's
and
still here,
still.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But your passion is so inspiring because I love to meet people that have so much passion for what they do, and it really comes across so nicely. And honestly, it's not annoying at all. Honestly, it's so fantastic, and I love it. And I can sit here
Very
and
generous.
that's I can listen to you talk all day because it comes across so nicely. And would you say that? 'Cause you answered quite a lot of my questions already. Would you say that? All these stories that you mentioned about, like the year 10, for instance, to the younger kids, would you say they need to be some of your biggest challenges, yet have been some of your biggest success stories too? Working with maybe potentially difficult kids, yet you've spoken to them, you've worked with them, and they've come across much better afterwards.
Look, I think it's a mistake in this space to differentiate too hard between the age of a human and their emotional intelligence. It's kind of like saying you've got two people. One person's 50 and the other person's 25. Who's the better piano player? And you're like, well, I don't know. Like who's how long are they practiced for? And it's the same with emotional intelligence. I think you can you I've never met a bad person. And
Mm,
that I've never met a bad kid. I've just known kids and people, humans, who have struggled to reconcile their experiences in an adaptive way and are doing the best that they can to navigate through life, given
mm,
what the experiences they've had in the past. And sometimes, obviously, this leads to a conversation about trauma and things like that. It's not always the big traumas or things. I think we can over-index it. It's just it's the way that our brain has evolved to survive, and the experience that they're drawing upon to make them act and behave in that way um, is less important because it's history, right?
mm,
It's important sometimes to know the why. It's not always important to know the why because the why, I think the why is important for the individual to know, but for me, not as an external person, it's kind of more to do with how, when you feel that emotional kick, what do you do with that, and how can you help control for that? And sometimes the why helps in pulling in that emotional kick for sure. But I as the second person in the conversation, I don't need to know that. If they feel like if they know it, then that's great. Then they can deal with it. Sometimes I need to help them find what that why is for them, for sure. And I think that's the beautiful thing of teachers and the role of mentors to teachers, because but teachers need to go through the same thing, just like kids need to go through the same thing. And I think when we judge people to be problem kids or troubled adults, or I think that automatically puts them in a box in our mind where sometimes we become part of their problem, because the stereotype effect is that they start acting the way that they're expected to.
mm,
And it kind of reinforces their maladaptive behavior in a weird sort of way. So when you strip that away and just go, we're all just humans
trying to navigate our day in the best way possible. And sometimes the way that we respond and react to situations isn't so great. But the reason isn't because they don't like me or they don't like someone else or these other things. It's just their experience has taught them some maladaptive ways to deal with that. And we need to try to retrain the brain. This is the beautiful thing about brain plasticity. The goal for all of us is to recognize when that happens, because it does happen to all of us. Try to recognize that in us. For teachers, and when I work with students, it's and other teachers, it's trying to help them recognize what those experiences are, and then remap that emotional experience in the brain and practice remapping it, because it's going to feel hard, because you know feeling and going with that reactivity kind of feels good. So our brain has a way of releasing dopamine when we act in really idiotic ways, because it feels like, well done, you've just saved yourself from that calamitous situation of the past, and irrespective of whether they like you or hate you, you're not dead. So well done, you. And so you get this little hit, and you realize, I have to retrain my brain to go, no, this situation is different. I can have a different outcome by acting differently, or utilizing the energy that I have in a different way, and not being subservient to my past experiences, because that's what we do. We essentially become emotionally trapped by our past experiences, and that's what kneecaps us for our future opportunities. So you've got to let the past be in the past. I love that great old saying that people who live too much in the past are depressed. People who live too much in the future are anxious. People that are really at peace live right now. And they go, how can I just be now? Go, oh, right now I've got that emotional kick. That's interesting. Why? Someone else in this situation wouldn't have that kick. How do I, why have I got that kick there? See why it is there. Okay, sit down. That now I go, okay, now I need to retrain what I do in that situation. You'll never get rid of that kick. I think that kick always sits there, but you can lessen its impact and be quicker at righting yourself when your brain sort of hijacks you, thinking that you may be in a dangerous situation simply because you think that somebody's talking behind your back, or that these other two people, maybe they're conspiring against you, or whatever the situation might be that creates that maladaptive reactiveness, or that politicking and all that sort of ugly stuff that we see in adults. We see that in kids as well. It's a bit of the same. That's a really long answer to your question. It's a great question though, when we talk about kids and how situations impact us as humans. On that, and I know you're about to ask, and I don't want to
honestly
pause him going to tirades of monologues, and I realize that maybe I'm doing that a little bit, but no, I won't. I'm going to throw back to you. Let's go to you.
Okay. I was going to ask like a kind of like an additional question on that, actually, about how you kind of track that progress of work with different schools, different students. Is it like you kind of old school ways, use that technology? How do you kind of track that progress of how you work with everyone?
Yeah, look, the journey of better emotional health is an interesting one to try and track from a mental health and well-being point of view, or from a human perspective, in terms of performance. Because how do you compare future opportunity as it is, as opposed to what it would have been if you didn't act well, or how it could have been if you acted better? You can't sort of do that meaningfully. And so all you've got, and I think comparing humans to humans is a fool's game. It really is a fool's game, because we've all got different journeys, we've all got different experiences, we've all got different strengths and talents when it comes to this. So trying to compare yourself to others is a fool's game. It becomes a zero-sum game. So how do you track and measure success? Well, what's interesting is that you can only track yourself against yourself, and you can look at the ways that you handle situations, and what was your reaction to that situation, and what was the severity of that reaction to that situation over time. And if we have a look at severity and arousal, again, back to that emotion wheel of how aroused we are, and why different situations make us aroused, I think you can start to track mental health and well-being by looking at the next situation. If you've learned some things, were you as impacted? Were does the emotional state of others around you have an undue effect on yourself? You know, are you still an insecurely attached human being to somebody else, which makes you anxious or avoidant and things like that? And when you start to delve into those things, you can track them in terms of your own balance of wholeness within yourself. And so I think as an individual, you can track that, and we can start to track that through consistent survey data, looking at emotions and emotional reactivity, as you know, and build some honest rapport and trust between trust circles. So if you've got a really good rapport between you and your friend, you'll be more open and honest about your emotions with that friend and that emotional journey. I think the same with teachers. So how do we collect data? We collect data and only show that data to what would be considered the trusted circle, so we can build that trust so that people don't see these survey data as a way of communicating to the powers that be and gets that gamified. But how do we limit that sort of really intimate and personal data to the trust circle that it's intended to be? And I think then we get some real traction over time, and we can see people starting to improve because they've got that way of being able to measure in a much more explicit way. In a way, it's making the implicit explicit in a safe way. I think the problem with a lot of well-being things that they are point-in-time surveys, and they're very public. You know, what I'm saying here is going to be shared with other people, so I'm going to say what they think they want me to say or what I need to say, because I'm not really going to be honest about what I say, or I'm going to overstate what my experience is because I'm disgruntled and I want to send a message to someone, or I want to be seen, or I want to be heard. You know, all these sorts of other things. It's actually more what's missing in a lot of those things is the dysregulation that's driving different types of behaviors. So I think tracking is really important. It's useful at an individual level. I think it's useful within a trust circle to see how each other is going on. Outside of that, I don't think measuring it and tracking it is actually that helpful. What you will see, though, if we do get emotional regulation right, you'll see less community dysfunction, right? You'll see less antisocial behaviors in the community. You'll see less arguments. You'll see a heightened level of debate amongst individuals, so that are allowed to have a clash of ideas in a way that's not taking things personally. You'll find that people get less offended, you know, and the offense factor goes down, because offense, you realize, it says more about you than it does about the person giving offense, right? There's all sorts of other ways. It's not just about, you know, people go, well, if I'm not offended, how do we have an arbiter for what's fair and what's right? And, you know, well, maybe being what's right really isn't the point of life. You know, maybe being influential is. And if you're being influential, then you will mediate those things in a much more adaptive way, you know. And I think you know, I think what's happening sociologically at the moment, we could break this cycle of reactivity at a social level if we deal with this at an individual level. You know, even economic issues, macroeconomic issues, can be solved largely by individuals making better individual decisions, right? And so I think, how do we track and measure these things? So we can make a line between emotional regulation and better communities and better and more just better communities and more whole, you know, less disenfranchisement and things like that. But you can't just look at less disenfranchisement and better economic communities and more whole communities and track that backwards. You know, there's a causal problem there, of course, but I think it's a strong enough trend that we're seeing, particularly in Australia, in some communities, high Indigenous communities that have had generational issues, where we're starting to see them where just shift. Things that were seen to be unshiftable are shifting. And it's not just because of what we're doing in the schools, but I think what we're doing at the schools starts a chain reaction. And then people take it upon themselves, armed with this new, very practical way of looking at what's happening at an emotional level, both at individually and at a community level, and is able to sort of see the dysfunction for what it is and deal with that dysfunction. People are less likely to go and rely on drugs, because, you know, people are on drugs a lot of the time to solve a problem. They feel disenfranchised. They feel their emotions are at such a bad state when they're not on drugs. They get on drugs in order to escape. They're trying to soothe the pain that's in their minds. Often, like 9 times out of 10, it's emotional dysregulation pain. So you fix the emotional dysregulation, and all of a sudden, things like drinking problems and different addictions and more harder drugs and things like that become less prevalent, because people don't need to solve the problems that they were solving with those things, right? It's not, drugs aren't the enemy. Emotional dysregulation that's driving people to drugs is the enemy. It don't matter how much you make drugs illegal. If it's the way that people are solving for their problems to get out of their life, or to solve an emotional pain that's sitting in their heads, they'll do illegal things to get it. Their emotions drive that behavior. So I think it really is, this is a social revolution. I think, AI is going to change what we do. EI, emotional intelligence, is going to revolutionize the way that how we do this, and the impact on society. AI will give us efficiency. EI will give us peace. Right? This is the truth. And I think the pursuit of happiness, actually, if you boil down to it, it's not the pursuit of cheerfulness. It's the pursuit of peace. That's what we want. And peace is a form of happiness. I don't know about you, but my peaceful resting face is kind of like my bitch resting face, right? It's kind of the same thing. But I don't have to be this high arousal happiness to be happy all the time. I go into workplaces where they're trying to be happy and they get told they have to be happy. And it's like, I just got to have some time with myself. I just need to you can't maintain that level of energy, particularly if it's covering up some injustice or some other things, which are actually driving some emotional dysfunction. So that's kind of the counterintuitiveness of it. So these are the things that we're really trying to solve for, and in a practical way,
So amazing. We've got 1 minute left on this link, so I want to send you anyone in a moment. But before that, I just want to say how amazing all that is. I love to finish on a positive note. So bear with me. I want to send you a brand new link. And we'll have a couple more questions after that. So just give me 2 seconds if you want, okay? But honestly, everything that you just said there was incredibly inspirational and amazing. And thank you for all the work that you do. I mean, what do you feel like your next steps are in your career with Switch for School? And how do you kind of see the future?
Well, I think there's such great natural growth at the moment, and I think India in particular is really starting to wake up to, I think, the impact, particularly of Switch for Schools on some of their academic achievements and things like that, and there's a desire and sort of a growing appetite there. So I think I think it's indicative of what's happening around the world. But I think the next steps for us, I think, just to follow the tide. I think go with the flow to a degree. I have a great uncle who was a long-time politician in Australia, and I said, you can't hold back the tide, but you can maximize its impact. And I think when the tide comes in on anything in life, you've got to ride with that. And I think we're looking at just riding with that, because I think that's where we're going to have the most impact. And for us, impact is the most important thing. Yes, we're building a company. We are for profit and for impact. I think being a for-profit company is the most transparent way that we can be. I don't sort of understand a lot of why non-for-profits, people just be for profit. Why is that such a bad thing? But I think from a emotional standpoint, where Switch is going, I think we're really honing in not just on student wellbeing, but also teacher wellbeing. And I think making sure that we do things for teachers that are very practically, not just to save them time, but also mental energy. And I think when we look at teacher burnout, it's not just workload that leads to burnout. In fact, workload and burnout are a relatively weak correlation, particularly in the standards of work we see it today. But I think that fracturing between colleagues, or the inability to control classes, or the sense of helplessness or loss of control and things like that, I think they all contribute to an emotional burnout, which teachers go, I don't need this. I can do something else for twice as much money for half as much pain, and they end up going there. But like I said before, unlocking that that ability for teachers to do what they want to do, or why they started teaching in the first place. And part of that story is looking at their own mental health and well-being, and to increase that. So I think that's really the next step for us, is to really keep working with students, keep the focus on the next generation and the students, but increasing our efforts with teachers and with parents as well, within that community. I think that's really the next steps for us.
That sounds brilliant. And I just want to once again say thank you for everything that you're doing, for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it. Keep up the most amazing work. And how can people reach out to you? If they want to work with you, how can they reach out to you? How can they find you?
Yeah, I think the website Switch4Schools. So Switch is in WITCH, the number 4, and then schools, either .com or .com.au. You'll be able to Google us and find us. You can contact us through that web form. That is the best way to contact us. That gets directly to an inbox that I share. Or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm friendable, contactable, and all those sorts of things on LinkedIn. And those 2 ways are probably the best 2 ways to get in contact.
Sounds amazing. And I've got many more questions to ask you, hopefully for a future episode. But I know that you're a busy man. I won't give you a time any much longer. But once again, thank you.
Let's do a take 2.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm up for it. Let's do number 2 conversation. And I swear it'll be less monologue and more conversation next time. I'll try. I'll give it a go anyway. No promises.
But you know what? I can see to everyone, I can speak to a lot of people on the podcast. Everyone says the same thing there. When they're so passionate about something, they talk so much, yet they apologize for that. I don't think you should ever apologize for being so passionate and talk about what you love and what you're trying to achieve, because that just shows that you're passionate about what you do. So never ever apologize for being you. I think it's amazing. So keep up that amazing work. Honestly, it's incredible.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And yes, I have learned to love myself. So in all the right sort of adaptive ways, I hope anyway. So, I'm okay with me.
There you go. We all are, don't we? Honestly. Oh, but
Love
thank
it.
you so
All
much.
right.
Speak to you soon. Take care. Everyone. Take care.